Welcome to Rewild by Design, a podcast for women in midlife who are ready to burn the rule book, drop the good girl mask, and come home to who they really are. I'm your host, Marissa, a human design and Gene Keys mentor, and your guide in this wild woman era. Get ready for bold conversations, raw truths, and the kind of insights that'll shake you awake. Because midlife isn't the end of your story. It's the point where you finally get to write it your way. Welcome back to Rewild by Design. I am really excited. I say that every week, but I really am. Just to be on this podcast and sharing all of these insights with you, to me, is so fulfilling. And I want to talk about something that maybe is not so sexy today, and that's decisions. We have decisions every single day. We're faced with them. From the moment we open our eyes till the moment we go to bed at night, there's always decisions. And I want to specifically talk about why using your mind to make your decisions often leads to exhaustion, frustration, or even regret. If you've ever made a choice that looked absolutely perfect on paper, but it felt wrong or just something about it didn't feel right, you know exactly what I mean. And human design teaches us that the mind is this brilliant awareness tool. But it was never built to direct your life like a compass. That role, no matter what your human design type is, belongs to your body. From the time that we're really little, we are told, I guess maybe not all of us, but the majority of us are told to think it through, or be smart, or make the right choices. Right? I'm guilty of it. When my daughter was a teenager and going out all the time, I would tell her, now make smart choices. But logic and reason have been put on this pedestal. So we end up growing up and believing that the pro and con list will save us. Or if we just research enough, I'm talking to you line ones, we'll know. Or if we plan hard enough, nothing can ever go wrong. But the mind is conditioned. And check out the previous episode about conditioning for a little bit more detail on that. But our minds are constantly filled with other people's voices, whether that's our parents or teachers, bosses, partners, or culture and society. When you rely solely on your mind, you're usually just recycling someone else's expectations and not your internal truth. Think about a time that you said yes because it seemed reasonable or the responsible thing to do, even though your body might have been whispering or knocking on the little door and saying, no, this isn't it. But you ignored it. Maybe it was a job or a relationship or even something as simple as a social invitation out to a party. Now, on paper, saying yes might have looked fine, but in reality, if you really dig into it, saying yes when your body said no ended up draining you. And that's what happens when the mind leads. So when you make decisions from just the brain, from the mind, you end up staying stuck in situations that are long past their expiration date. Or maybe you override your body's signals until they show up as stress, resentment, or burnout. Or maybe you keep looping in this indecision because there's never enough information. I know, being a triple Libra, sun, moon, and rising, the lower expression of that, really, they say Libras are so indecisive. But one of the biggest costs to relying just on our minds for decisions is trust. Every time you ignore your inner authority, you teach yourself that your voice can't be trusted. By midlife, this residual buildup into constant second guessing. And I know this because I lived this. In the past, I've taken jobs or career paths because they seemed like the reasonable thing to do, right? I needed a job. There was one offered. My intuition, let's say, said, no, that's not it. But then I had to weigh out that pro and con list. I was like, well, what if there isn't another offer that comes through? And I ignored that pit in my stomach. Now, at the time, like I said, that decision felt okay. It didn't feel like, ooh, wow, this is amazing, because I wasn't trusting my intuition. I wasn't trusting my spleen, because that's my inner authority. And I've also stayed silent in conversations when my instincts were screaming. I've really had to work consciously hard to be more intentional about how I show up in relationships and speaking my mind. And every single time I went against my inner authority, it cost me more energy than it gave me. I want to also say that, we're not black and white here. This isn't that the mind is terrible or useless. The mind is a beautiful tool for conceptualizing. It's just not meant for choosing. The mind's role is in awareness and perspective and inspiration. It's awesome for learning and sharing and brainstorming, but it's not designed to tell you where to live, what job to take, or whether or not to stay in that relationship. So when you free your mind from making decisions, your life gets lighter. It becomes what it's meant to be. The mind becomes the passenger that observes and shares, not the driver white-knuckling the wheel. And in human design, we all have an inner authority. And then this is our decision-making superpower. And each authority has its own unique way of guiding decisions. When you follow it, you patch one of the biggest energy drains of all. And see a previous episode where I talked all about energy leaks. So we're going to go from the most prevalent authority down to the least common. So emotional authority, there are 50% of the human population that has emotional authority, so has a defined solar plexus. With this, your clarity comes over time. You are not designed to make decisions right in the heat of the moment. So when you rush, you end up regretting it. Your practice is in riding that wave and noticing how a decision feels across all of the highs and all of the lows before actually committing. So a good practice would be, if someone wants a decision right away, just say, hey, do you mind if I get back to you? Or is it okay if I sleep on that? Because that's good practice for you to get into the habit of trusting that emotional wave. Now, with sacral authority, your body speaks through sound and sensation. A yes it feels differently for everybody. Every sacral defined person I've talked to, and this is only for generators and manifesting generators. The sacral will tell you what you have energy for and what you don't. So a yes might feel like an expansion or an aha or a mm-hmm. But a no might feel like maybe a little bit of a contraction or a pulling away, like a or a mm-mm. And your work is in listening in the moment. Because if you bypass that immediate sacral yes or no, that's when your mind gets in the way. Now, with splenic authority, this is just for projectors and manifestors. Even if you're a generator, you can have a defined spleen center, but your sacral center will take over as the decision making, so the authority. But the spleen knows instantly as well, but it's quiet. This is a little nudge, a little whisper, maybe a little pull towards something or away from something. The challenge here is trusting that first instinct instead of letting your mind argue you out of it. And I will argue that this could be one of the tougher authorities to really harness and learn. And especially if you have a defined ajna or head, because that can sometimes it's reconditioning yourself to trust your spleen. Now, with ego or heart authority, again for projectors and manifestors, decisions are all about desire. What's in it for you? Not proving. The leak here is in saying yes just because you're trying to prove either you're strong or you're committed. But your authority will always ask you, do I actually want this? Self-projected authority, just with projectors, you hear yourself in your own voice. So talking it out loud with a trusted person brings your awareness and your truth forward. If you silence yourself, you lose access to that inner compass. And now I understand that not everyone has a trusted confidant that you can just soundboard with, but we all have a phone. Open a voice notes app and just hear yourself and then hear that recording back and see how it feels in that decision. Mental, or they call it environmental authority, again with just projectors, you need to be in the right environment and also have a sounding board. The wrong space will cloud your inner intuition, but the right space brings things into perspective. So again, the same as self-projected, try soundboarding with someone. And a tip would be, hey, I'm not really looking for advice here. Do you mind if I just talk something out loud with you? And last but not least, next time I'll go with reflectors first, but reflectors do not have inner authority. They have lunar authority because they are tied to the cycles of the moon. Time is your ally as a reflector. You're designed to feel into a decision across a full lunar cycle, about 28 days, because that's the time that it takes the moon to transit all 64 gates. When you rush decisions, you end up in situations that don't actually nourish you and slowly dim your light. When you start making decisions from your body instead of your mind, now I know this is a practice and it goes against all of that conditioning that we've come in with, but number one, the second guessing quiets down. It'll still be there, but you have discernment now and self-trust. And number two, you stop wasting energy on situations that don't actually nourish you. And three, you begin to feel more grounded in your own self, your own pace, and your own decisions. Now, like I said, it doesn't mean that every decision is going to be flawless and it's always super simple. That's not how life works. But the more you trust your inner authority, the more it will speak up, and you'll enter into more and more decisions that are correct for you. And that difference, I will tell you, is everything. Now, as we wrap up, a few reflection questions for you. I want you to think of a decision that you regret. And I know there's some schools of thought that say no regrets, but for the purposes of this exercise, think about a decision that you made that you regret. Was it made from your mind, or was it made from your authority? Number 2, where are you still letting logic override your body's unique signals? And 3, what's one small choice you can experiment with this week by following your authority? I would love to hear you in my DMs on Instagram. You can find me on Instagram or TikTok. DM me after you go through these questions. I would love to hear your experience with these. And if you're curious about human design and not really sure where to start, like this piqued your interest, but you're like, holy shit, Marissa, I have no idea what you're doing. I invite you to check out my free energy snapshot audio. You'll get your free human design chart and then a 10-minute or less audio guide that will help you understand your human design type a little bit more. And if you want to go even deeper into your chart, you're like, yes, Marissa, this is exactly what I need. I have a digital human design reading called Decode Your Design, and I will link that in my show notes as well. And this is a complete breakdown, soup to nuts, of your entire human design chart. And it gives you the mechanics and the patterns, how you are uniquely designed to live and decide. And one last thing is that if you are the woman that is at a crossroads in your life and you feel like there's this nudge for bigger changes and where you're ready to fully step into your inner decision-making power, I invite you to take a peek at the Frequency Mastermind. It's my space for women who are ready to boldly step into their next chapter with confidence, with power, and with the authentic woman that you are meant to be. So thank you for listening, and I will catch you next time.
Well, that's it for this episode of Rewild by Design. I trust that you got what you needed here today, and just remember, you don't need another checklist. You need your own voice back. So go out, live a little louder, a little freer, and a hell of a lot more like yourself. And I'll see you next time.